Hey guys, welcome. First of all, happy divine, feminine, inner empress energy day for all. For everyone here, we all have, of course, the divine feminine essence within us. We're not talking about gender, of course. We're here. Have a lovely day here, regardless of how you choose to spend it, and with who, and in however sense. We're here with some topic of channeling, and Spirit had me sort of really concentrating here with this particular theme. I hope you enjoy it, and let me know what you think. Seeing 3 through there on the clock. In case you're curious, I'm a channeler, oracle, starseed medium. I'm working here with the energy, the guides, starseed, light body council. We are here mostly working, obviously, yes, for right there with the Pleiadian light council, in case you're curious and wondering if it's your first time. All right, so we're talking about narcissistic frequency. The interaction is a reminder of the consciousness that we are in a programmed reality currently in 3D. Right. So the presence of the entity that brings us into a conversation with someone who is narcissistic or holds that frequency. It is important to remember that the soul is separate from the entity. Whereby we can say nobody is inherently narcissistic, but they can take on narcissism of their being. You can have multiple entity frequencies, but yes, multiple entity frequency attachments. But let's just say, right, should they take on that entity frequency, there's a reason definitely for why it is, and there's a purpose for why it is you come into contact with these people. It's time to, first and foremost, the Spirit has made it clear to me, remove the identity that surrounds the connection that you have to that person, just as you would with anyone that you meet, right? It's really beyond that interaction. Just as you would say, well, I have a connection to my soul, to my spirit. So then who am I in that space, realizing that I'm connecting to my true self, right? So there is a sort of programming. And so where we come to this point of engineering and realizing that it is truly just that, and realizing that there is a sort of software, there is a sort of, let's clear around, a conversation happening when it comes to the reflecting of the program. When you meet a narcissist, what's happening is that they are basically telling you, I'm lost and I need help getting back home. What happens here is you realize that something maybe is a little bit different about this particular interaction. What is different about this interaction, and as an empath, you will feel this sort of very strange, maybe even sort of connection point, and you are true, it is true. The reason being that there is a particular closeness, so-called proximity between your force field and that of the so-called narcissist, in such a way where you form a sort of dependency that is illogical should you be truly connected to the higher self. In other words, when you are really connected to your higher self, unity consciousness space, you would not be attracted to that frequency. Not talking in terms of soul contract, right? Hence why we don't ask to have narcissistic, right? For some of you, I'm hearing parents' experiences, but the soul knows where we are needed. And so you are a healer. The reason for why you come into contact with narcissistic entity energies and people, so-called, and experiences and situations is because you are there, not to detach from them and sort of eye for an eye it out, but to remind them and re-navigate them, repurpose them, recycle them, uproot them from that illusory belief that they are in a space of stagnated consciousness, believing that they are powerful, believing that they are dependent on something conditional outside of themselves for their source of happiness and supreme connection to their soul and their higher self. So this is where you come in, and you must remember that you are the sober driver. Spiritually speaking, you are aware, oftentimes as the empathic individual, and yes, that there is, and especially most likely one who has a very strong connection to the divine feminine essence, you are here to remind them of their mirrored divine essence too. Usually, right before you'll meet a narcissistic frequency, you will be very much in that energy space. You will be feeling very, 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 very strong with that frequency energy. Enter twin flame concept. The twin flame concept is really sort of like this match and stick moment where this is your sort of chance to really, 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 really transmute and spiral out the momentary discussion in time and space of how life is more than that paradigm of consciousness, where you're not bound and tethered by this particular predicament that we have reincarnated into. And so the twin flame, let's click on the right side of the body, is really about, okay, reigniting the consciousness that you are a replica of your own recollection point. In other words, how well you're able to reconnect with the many fragments, so-called, of your being that are reflective and that reflect. So when you meet the twin flame, you are a reminder to that spirit essence that is alike your own ultimately, to re-navigate back home to source. And this can be something across timelines, across miles, across lifetimes, this is the purging point and the ultimate reignition of the calling for home, which is something that we will talk about more in a moment and towards the end of this video, towards the end of this channeling. This is the recycling, ultimately the repurposing of your reality. So here we are, remembering how to create our form here, how to recolor the stigma of our institution, of why we hold meaning and value, why we reveal ourselves here at this time, why it is that we are real here at this time. If we are not yet whole and complete, it is, in other words, the transition point. I know this is very abstract, it can be, but bear with me. This is where we take the same conversation and we see it in the same exact way, but without differentiating the way the holographic image is set around it. So in other words, without judging the so-called outcome of how we may choose to reestablish our sense of importance, our sense of greatness, our sense of mission, our sense of duty, which is spiritually something that we embody. And that's why those who do not believe in energy, those who are convinced that energy does not exist, are I'm hearing from source, lacking the phone cut there. Let's continue to the illustration from Spirit. So the thing is that we oftentimes feel that we need to leave the narcissistic energy entity behind. This is why we don't feel in our bones that we can really feel right about that and heal from that. This is on the energetic plane. The real healing and transcendence that's found for yourself and that individual is where you continue to guide that person by way of your shift in transcendence. So not cutting the narcissist off, but just helping mobilize them to a healthier space. So as you reestablish boundaries, creating a sort of kite where you are now moving your energy field. As you move, you must keep the movement strong enough, impactful enough, so that your aura moves, and so that they must move too in order to understand you. Now, you are, in a way, check baiting them with the mystery, the curiosity. In this case, it is to understand source. The source of, though, in their eyes, why it is that they no longer have the establishment of that illusory paradise with you, where you were in that lateral system and structure of influence, where they were so-called above in a hierarchical sense. So this is establishing, let's clear it, go back, the wavelength of uniformity, where they will now see to understand once again how it is that the energy of unity consciousness thrives. And I'm hearing like a beehive. So the narcissistic entity frequency is sort of like one bee believing that they're not part of the hive and kind of buzzing off on their own. So this is sort of like you're renavigating them back to home. Basically, the narcissistic energies, if we were to, and if we are to associate them as an entity frequency, is a frequency that has been lost. They are lost. So when you come into contact, if you do believe that you have this sort of higher spiritual purpose for coming into contact with the narcissist frequency, then you would say, well, aha, there is a reason for this, and I am to help renavigate them. This is very different from saying, I will remain in this situation out of sympathy, empathy, and not challenge the paradigm, which is, again, a delusion and illusion of the narcissism entity energy space. So when you say, well, I realize that you are still worthy, but it's not for the reasons that you think you are worthy, then you bring their conversation to continue, but now just in a different way. And this is where you continue to tether them into your story. But by way of the reconnection and the reconnecting to a mantra that has no purpose in terms of ego, which doesn't make sense, which baffles, which ultimately, though, deconstructs the psychology of the narcissist and causes them to pursue it, the understanding, the unfathomable, the source of their own crux of why it is that they feel without purpose. Should they not have some kind of conditional interactive space? Now let's backtrack, let's clear. Now where are we going with this? Now you have detached from their ideology. In a way, you have unsubscribed from their mentality. You've moved on. This is very different from literally moving on and disregarding and taking eye for an eye. This is you saying, I am the teacher. I'm hearing a pluribus unum here. I'm taking it as well. You say, I am the teacher. I realize I have something to teach you. And yes, it is without, obviously, ego in that space. You're coming from the transcendent space of wanting to reconnect them to their higher self. It's truly selfless. And so you're rerouting them. It's like they're kind of drunk. You have to imagine that the narcissist is sort of drunk in this reality, and you're the sober driver. So it's just a matter of checking out and saying, hold on, I am definitely a sober driver and I will bring you back home. So in the heart space, okay, yes, the subconscious mind, the spirit ultimately wants to come back home. Does not want to be wandering the streets. Yes. Let's make sure. Yeah. These are karmic obligations that we hold as well. So now here we are. This is why it is not about so-called discarding the narcissist, because that would also be reflective of your own space where you were at a certain point, empathic to that energy. Maybe there is something of a reflective energy where you have realized the need for the codependency and subsisted in that space of illusion. Obviously, though, for a reason, and that is where the true transcendence is held, in that space where you say, I will appreciate that I have a role to play here. This gift that I also give myself and that I give the world, ultimately by redirecting and renavigating this person, not just dropping them off and discarding them energetically. Meaning, it's not about resentment. It's not about hating this person for having a programming. It's about renavigating the spirit and ultimately detaching them from their own lateral connection. So their spirit is mirrored in the sense of how it is that you are connected to them via the cord, whereby they are also, it is their soul, and then it is their entity. It's a Russian doll. This is also them. It's a mirroring. So, yes. Yeah, so it's very ironic. So it's about pointing it out so that they can understand that they need to actually transform and transition the thought form hierarchical structure of how energy is positioned to truly manifest. So let's go. Success and happiness and abundance, which is the source code, DNA, at its core. So this is about reminding them that they do want happiness, that they do want that, reminding them of what that is. And that is, again, done by way of you connecting to it. And that is source. So as you connect to source and as you renavigate and further release the bounds that have been drawn out in this lateral structure, means of connecting to the narcissistic entity frequency, because this is how it actually connects. When you say this is no longer actually functional and real, you transition to the gateway, ultimately through the solar plexus. And there's a heightening, obviously, of the vibration. And now you are in longitudinal conversation, whereby all are equals, right? And this is the space in which we come to a space of uniformity. So it's sort of like they need to watch other dogs play and understand this is the mentality of the pack. Really take it from any conversation, right? With Cesar Millan on his show. It's like, it's not that the dog is a bad dog. There's no such thing as a bad dog. It's about the entity. So let's backtrack. Sorry. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't mean that, at times it's not necessary to detach from those who refuse to release. So let's go. The frequency. But that doesn't mean that you do not appreciate that person, hence why you are still pulling them. You just went from this to here you are now. This is falling away. You're swooping up. You're building momentum. You're actually moving the energy and you're shape shifting the dynamic of the molecular structure of this connection. So instead of going like this, you're going like this. And you're going to move the energy with momentum, to which point again, should you stay in contact with this person and create another source of tension? Okay, like how monkeys, they swing from tree to tree in the jungle. This tree is a mystery, and you keep it as that mystery, but you hook on to this. This is what now is fueling and subsisting you. So now you have another outlet, you have another source, you have something that you are subsisting on that is not them in this system, because this does not make sense. So you're restructuring the paradigm. Now as you reconnect to source, aka doing healing, okay, self-care practice, raising vibration, now you bring with them, you bring with you, okay, this is ultimately the desire. What comes along for the ride here is the desire to understand the core frequency of the self, which is the core space of understanding truly, like the soul that has tethered to the narcissistic frequency. And again, as a Russian doll within, we're talking about this, we'll say stage 2, grade 2, is this soul is what understands at its core that this is what is actually real. So you're saying, come with me, come right this way with me. This is what is actually real. And this is what is actually happiness. And this is what is actually going to be subsisting and holding. This is very exhausting because it's not natural. When you fight the force, the natural force of the universe, you will find that you are depleted. So deep within the subconscious psyche of, let's continue. Now, I'm hearing acacia wood, resin. Okay. Now, as you reform, you bring along with you. That's why it's important not to cut this connection, y'all. You got to bring this connection with you. We're talking abstract energy here. Not cutting the cord because there is no such thing. The cord is related always because all are one, we're all connected. What is released is the fragmented relativism of application of relevance of this structure. This is outdated source code, software, programming. It's like you kind of have to just like alert them that it's not going to run the hardware, the software even. I'm hearing both hardware and software of this new system intergalactically, which will require most people to operate on the system of unity consciousness. This is the way that we will survive. Now, again, it is, let's continue. So we want to survive. That is the point. Okay. But if you do not want, this is a different discussion. But Spirit will be supporting those who do want to subsist on this new system of uniformity consciousness. So going back to it, what happens is there is this undying curiosity, realizing that it's getting lonely here. I'm hearing, run, better run, dun, dun, in my pocket, all the time, when they're dun, 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 you better run, okay, so, it's like, suddenly it starts to get cold out here. Suddenly there's nothing relevant here. Now it's like, everyone's moving, and it's like you're migrating, you're shifting the pattern of migration. So it's about the movement of the energy, the movement of the curiosity, and the dedication that you have to building that wave out, building the wave out, to connect souls that are somehow lost back to source code. That is the point. So what happens next, basically, the soul, you bring their soul with you. You remind them, in other words. You help them recollect. You help them recollect the pieces Now what happens, their attention is completely on you. Here you are, now you've reestablished the hierarchy. They now see you as someone who has knowledge. This is so important to keep a mystery, a secret, because it's something that they do not know. The thing about the narcissist is they believe that they know and that they have, and that it is all knowing, and that it is all encompassing, and that it is the only truth. That's how they do have you in this conversation, and that's why also this conversation, to begin with, the presence of this conversation is reestablishing the fact that you also may have some sort of ego complexity that is to be, as well, at times recalibrated. Obviously, this is something that is in the contract, soul contract meant to be. So, and that is, yeah. So now the conversation point here is, as we swing up and back to this mysterious source spiral of love and light, truth of the higher soul species, whereby we know thyself based on the unity consciousness, which is longitudinal, rather than this lateral, okay, where they are in lateral. And you are in passive. Let's clear it. Yes, it is here where true awareness is found, and that is where the true peace and harmony lies. This is very hot Cheeto, which is exhausting. It's like paying, bill to bill, day to day. Let's clear it. This is your savings. This is when you're saving your energy, because you're not looking outside, up or down, who's above you, who's below you, unlike what's happening here. This is why this is so disempowering and let's go. And disturbing to the ultimate core frequency. It's not them. It is their entity. So if you believe that the narcissist is a narcissist to you only, no. To be a narcissist, they have a narcissistic energy upon them as well. So let's attach them. So now, as let's backtrack. As you reestablish boundaries as well with what you're willing to allow to tell you who you are and your core meaning, now we have a new format of truth for truth. So this is all about telling the narcissist, you don't tell me what truth is. You don't tell me what is true, especially my own. You can tell yourself whatever you think the truth is, but you'll do it right over here. And I'll be right over here, and I have my own separate truth, because I subsist on myself, and I don't look outside of the bounds I don't look outside of the boundaries to understand who I really am. It's no longer like this. Gone are the days of this. This is very isolating, cold, and for both, it's not integrative ultimately. And when we are in this unilateral position, which looks kind of like the universe right there, we realize that we are integrated, and this is where we find our source, our harmony, our balance. And whoever doesn't cherish that or want that has an entity attachment. Let's backtrack. It's not that they do not want to be happy. It's not that they do not want to be in the light. It's that they have an entity attachment. So it's kind of like, it's just like a bug. So this is more or less just deprogramming, debugging. Yes. And repositioning the discussion, the dichotomy between the higher self and the notion of the ego. So let's get a little bit further. Now what happens, and give me a second, let's take a break. Now what happens here is you are in a single file line. Now, there's nothing in particular that they need to connect to in order to feel safe and harmonious. They do not need to repress you to feel that they are somehow above. Their position here is not dependent on anything in their timeline, in their tier, in their bandwidth, their frequency. They are, in other words, now self-sufficient, and they go inwards like a spiral rather than moving outwards in a space of time and space. Materialism, constructed ideologies, patternized frequencies. Now, authenticity will be felt here and will be had here. Greatly so. Because now we are not spending time, we don't have to get our goggles on and look around us and see who's below us, who's above us. It's not about getting competitive. Competition is very draining and is very exhausting. When we are in a collaborative energy, this is just, this is cozy. This is very cozy. On our floaties here, holding hands and connecting, this is where the true power lies, is in recalling your different pieces and discussion points, in recalling the many parts of you. This is where your true wholeness lies, where you are in the complete story. In this fragmented reality of the narcissist, you believe that you are only a fraction Yes. Looks similar, right? Of what you really are. And so, of course, the narcissist is unhappy and is lonely. And of course, they will try to cling and look up above and look down below at everything that can define them. This is all they've so-called known. So as we eradicate, right, and again, this is obviously an entity attachment. As we reestablish, you are a teacher. If you come into contact with a narcissist, you are a teacher. This is the point. You are a healer. You are to re-navigate their consciousness back to source. And that's all it really is about. It's really very much rather simple. Just taking a polarity dynamic and shifting it. It's so simple as reminding one of their own greatness. But as all parts, as one. Rather than taking one pigment of color and trying to make it the whole painting, here we take every shade and hue, the gradients, and we remember, we recall their position, original position on the portrait. As characters. Source. Code of light. There's really nothing more to why the pattern has held to this point, why it is that it's so important to break it, but in this way. Let's backtrack clear. And only in this way. We must reposition it. Otherwise, we just leave it there. And we just chop it off. And then there's this whole traumatic bond moment. And this just grows and it becomes bigger. And then what they'll do is just look for another. So we got to just reprogram and teach this consciousness to shift and transmute. So congratulations. You are a transmuter if you come into contact often with narcissistic energies. Let's clear it in the back. So now, obviously it's a general video. It's a general message though. But what are we talking about now? Now, we are in this form of subsistence. And as this grows, it becomes more powerful, and this becomes the example. Now we shift the standard, the power, and the currency is in the whirlpool of the collective consciousness, memory. So really, transmuting darkness to light is just about transmuting shadow, but also recalling and reconnecting to memory, repurposing fragmented memory. You don't want to lose the source code. That's like saying, I don't know where to put the color yet, so I'm just going to throw the marker away. I mean, really imagine that, right? I mean, yeah. Let's say you were a painter, you have a French hat on. You have a paintbrush in your hand. You have this big canvas, this big, beautiful canvas, and everybody's watching you on stage paint. You have a whole audience here. Everyone's waiting for your masterpiece. Now, what happens when you encounter a conversation that doesn't feel right? A marker, a particular color, to which you may find there is resistance with your core frequency. Yes, you are true, you are right. You are very sensitive, empathic enough to realize and feel that there is something dissonant. But the question is always how you recharacterize and repurpose and renavigate, transmute, and consider those still. This conversation is relevant. We never throw and can never throw colors away. Truly. Should you remember and choose not to ultimately resist the conscious form of the painting. And the very act of painting is to reintegrate how we perceive of each color. Remembering that we're all here with a purpose and everything is valuable. Everything is a source upon source. A source back to source. A source back to source. Reimagined, reconnected, and recreated here in this space. So it is about reapplying the paint. That's really what reconnecting to source is like. Taking these colors and hues, remembering that they are magic, and reconsidering them as magic rather than something toxic and negative. We're not talking about the entity, because the entity is necessary to bring light to this dynamic, right? The shift that must change. And this in and of itself, this collective process is necessary as it is tension. Building the wave, let's clear in the crown chakra, to create more momentum in this centrifugal force of shift. Now, and change and transformation. So let's clear in the throat chakra. Let's clear the energy. Let's clear it up in the top right hand corner of the crown chakra on the right side. Now let's move here. Now here we are back at the conversation here. This is just a reflection of all. And it already exists. Already exists. You cannot change this. Even if you believe that certain colors are disposable, they are still here as a source code of memory, consciousness. And so now it is just really about acknowledging and admiring. And say life is about admiring the painting as it has been, as it is. How do we integrate the fallen heroes, the lost souls who seek? And we remember, and we can still see these people, their need and their awareness to reconnect as well, which is why they have found you. This is not to establish, though, romanticism in any kind of conversation here with a narcissistic entity attachment relationship. This is to bring light to the reality that this is a system. It is an actual code. It is a software. And you have the awareness that it is time to reprogram it. But it doesn't mean that this is an it. It means that this is a restructuring of the energy. This, though, the soul, even here, this, the soul, right? Because we have that Russian doll system, is still, we have this sort of mini, right? Sort of lateral conversation, is still without resistance. So no matter what you experience through time, memory, and space, you are still without, in your soul space, in your heart space, resistance. And you do know. But how do you recall, no matter what the form and shape is, no matter what your upbringing is, no matter what your so-called history is, how do you remain untainted, unhinged from that form in which the conscious takes place? And this is obviously karma. And we have different soul contracts for why we experience certain conversations. Let's move into the next part. Now that we are here, we build more deeply with momentum. Now it is here. We have a cone. And this becomes an energy force of determination. Which is why it is so important, should you be, when you are in a conversation such as this, lateral, the entity, to come with such momentum, to remember your connection to source so deeply and so greatly that you really begin to surf the wave. Imagine you're out at sea and you see a wave and you're like, I want to catch it. I really want to catch that wave, yo. You gotta really time it, and you gotta know it, and you cannot be looking back. You have to be looking at the wave, and you gotta time it and really click, jump, and surf it out, truly. Otherwise, the timing will be off. You're looking back. It's like, you can't be halfway. You have to be completely committed. And this is about committing. It's really not about this commitment, because even if you're committed here, this is conditional on both ends. Let's clear in the sacral. This is the real commitment to your purpose of why it is that you have possibly even come into contact to begin with this individual. So it is about a broader movement where we see stagnancy of consciousness here in the lateral conversation. We see true empowerment, transcendence, uniformity, and true change. Because we're actually moving, if we have the power within each of us here, rather than the isolated consciousness, let's say, where the narcissist does isolate themselves with you, depending on you and the interaction, to give their life meaning. Really, it should be independent. So they should not have to feel that you are there to give their life meaning. I mean, this is very silly, this right here, in comparison. I mean, you can do this, you can survive, but that will be very exhausting. This is much more powerful. So here we are. Let's backtrack. This is much more realistic. I'm hearing this is like painting without words. This is like taking a test without studying. This is real, and honestly, this is required to survive now. I'm hearing it as well in this day and age. So the migration pattern is what's necessary. And every person who does detach from this and move into this conversation here is building the momentum of the wave ultimately. But this is also sort of like the wind pattern of, let's say, if you imagine yourself as a bird who flies out and joins this broader flock. You're building this sort of conversation of a migration pattern, and you are convincing to others of this reality of consciousness. So this is about reminding people that this is actually something and that it exists. Yes, it does. Reminding you of your true self. Again, which is why it's so funny and so silly sometimes, because we do come into contact with people who say, oh, well, this is meaningless, and it is not, because this, again, and every person we do see, the soul source consciousness of code. So that's why sometimes as empaths we feel bad to let narcissists go, because we know that there is that reason why we came into contact with them. There's something that we needed to teach them. And so imagine yourself as a bird with this migration pattern coming back into your story. I'm hearing we do not delete scenes. It's already been printed. Now, in a way, we've already done it. We're just replaying it. Hence, again, the matter of the recollection of the memory. The recollection of the memory. So this is about how many people can we remind to migrate? You know what I'm saying? To get them back. And I see these little waves and these bands of energy. Kind of like wind movement. Wind patterns. Some people are kind of like way out here, but they feel it. They get it. And the longer you stay on this wavelength, you know, you get tighter and tighter and tighter with this orb. And so here we are. This is Corona. Quite literally think of the oculus, the eye. You remember why. And so this is why the resistance to this wave, as this has become so much stronger, collective consciousness has really remembered to more so than not, which is we've said this, that the shift has been made. We are definitely ascending. We're definitely ascended, and ascending, and increasing our vibration and ascending. This is going to be very hard. It's literally like the eye of the storm. This is literally like a tornado. This is literally like we are definitely not in Kansas anymore, Toto. So whoever is still trying to hang fucking on over here, guys, the reptilian entity frequencies, okay. This is like a wrench. And the debris will be so magnetized and sucked in to what is true and what is real that ultimately the narcissistic frequency will self-abort. This is what I'm hearing. This will realize, like a decaying corpse of consciousness, that it must abort because it is not real, it is not true. And so this is what dies off. And I know that might be a tough message, that might be a hard message, but this is an abstract message. What is real will just be pulled in like some form of inhalation. When the need for oxygen, the need for the collective oxygen is so high, the inhalation happens, and there's no changing what happens at that point. Let's continue. what is happening on 3D, in quotes, because we're no longer really here, Earth, to 5D. To 5D. Transition. I'm hearing Plato. Now, here we are. What happens is we take breath in and we fully inhale, we expand. And as we expand, we release. We slough off and away. Snake skin. This is the old paradigm. This is the point where like everyone upgrades their phones kind of vibe in society. Like hardly ever you see someone with a flip phone. No offense, living light, but that's kind of what it's like. Okay. Yeah. Gone are the days. Gone are the days. This is like the ancient narcissistic frequency, okay, pattern. This is gone are the days. It's clear and throat chakra. Gone are the days where this was the way. So this is sloughed off, right? And it's beautiful, right? It looks kind of like a rose. It is here. It is here. That now we begin to actually grow, take root. I think this is what we can call the poetry of our cause for being. Why exactly we came here as star seeds and beings of light, right? As beings of light. Here we are, I'm hearing Gertrude. Here we are, just here to take one everlasting inhalation. So that we can speak again. I hear that as well. Wow, that's weird. So we may be heightening here a muted consciousness. Something was not growing here. It could even have been the organ of the galactic organ was not respiring, and so here we are. It was something deflated. So now we basically, it's like a circus tent we pitched. Welcome to the circus of, yeah, what we're doing here on this particular grid. By the way, in case you're curious, I'm channeling here. I'm a channeler, starseed, oracle medium. So this is, let's move on. This is, yeah, we don't have time. Remember, we're no longer in time and space. We're just going to move on now. Keep moving. Here we are. We hold new form. And imagine, right, if we were to say, well, yes, this looks like an eye, right? The cornea, corona, the eye. The eye. Imagine if we were to breathe life into our perception as we re-establish this conversation. Imagine what life would be like should we be able to observe in this kind of form. As wholeness. Again. To be able to truly see once again. So can we say that maybe this is a bit like a state of a collective amnesia? So brought by the lacking purposeful will to perceive. So this is necessary, this process. This is about, it's like pumping a bicep. This is about tension and it's about magnetism. It is about push and pull, from stagnancy to movement, change, and back. And it is here that we then see different timelines. Different conversations or perspectives, right? You can draw out the cornea and these different, which is where we see multidimensionality. We see different lifetimes, timelines happening at the very same time. This is where we are definitely possibly headed, we'll say. Of course, it's free will. But where, as a consciousness, do we have enough frequency of, feeling fed up with this type of reality? Strong enough for the desire to be that we would seek change and desire, feel closely enough connected to this reality that we would seek it out. So when you meet a narcissist, you're really meeting this potential in them. And it's just a minutia of a moment, a fragmented interaction where you're able to collaborate and reconnect and reconsider your whole conversation here, really as an entity in physical being having a spiritual awakening. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope this was interesting. Spirit really is pushing here with us, and they believe that we can do it. So that's very exciting, guys. We'll see you next